Welcome back, guys. This week, we're going to be discussing our favorite resorts to stay for a Run Disney race weekend.
So Lake and myself have stayed at several of the resorts that Disney offers, and we also brought on a special guest who has stayed at some additional places that we haven't experienced yet and has also experienced staying with DVC as part of a Run Disney weekend.
Yep, so it is our pleasure to bring on DVC member and host of the DCL Podcast, Steve Creasy.
Hey, Lake. Hey, Katie. Thanks for having me back on, guys. I'm pretty excited to talk a little Run Disney.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you on. So why don't you go ahead and kind of talk about where you usually stay for a Run Disney race weekend and some of your favorite things about that.
So since we're DVC members, that's kind of our big focus is to try and use our points to get in the resorts. But because we're DVC members and so many people love Run Disney weekends, it's really tough to get in you've got to be in at the 11-month window basically to get in on most of the resorts. Unfortunately, most of our points are out on Alani. So if you understand DVC, that pushes us to the 7-month window. And generally, the only place that's still available is Saratoga Springs. But I will say that we love Saratoga Springs for a lot of different reasons. Yeah, Saratoga's, you guys aren't DVC yet, are you?
We are not, but we have stayed at some of the DVC resorts for Run Disney.
Okay, yeah, and Saratoga kind of gets I'm trying to find the right word for it. Sometimes it doesn't get as much love as some of the other resorts, I guess, for a lot of different reasons. But I think for a Run Disney weekend, I think it's like one of the most perfect places to stay. And a lot of that has to do with its location right next to Disney Springs. So if you're not going to the parks, it gives you so many more food options and things to do there.
Yeah, the one time we stayed there was for a Run Disney weekend, and we really enjoyed it. Is that section that's right there, the Congress Park? It's the closest one to Disney Springs. That we stayed right there, and we walked over for like every meal.
Yeah, and I think that's like one of they've got with DVC it marks off as preferred, and I can't remember all the different combinations that you can go with, but I think Congress Park is one of the preferred ones, and because of that reason, Katie, so that you can easily get over to Disney Springs. We have stayed a little bit further away in the Carousel, which is the furthest you can get, and then I'm totally drawing a blank on the second area that we stayed, but it's kind of right across from the main check-in area. But even though it's a little bit of a walk, it's kind of nice to be able to, especially after you've run the half marathon or even the marathon, after you relax a little bit, kind of stretch your legs and walk over there. And with all the different food options and entertainment, I just think it's a great place to stay.
Absolutely. Okay. So the proximity to Disney Springs is a great thing to keep in mind when you're getting ready to book Run Disney vacation, especially if, like Steve said, you're not necessarily going into the parks. You're so close to a lot of really fun things at Disney Springs. Another resort that we have stayed at that shares that perk is Port Orleans, specifically for me, French Quarter.
Right.
I don't think you've stayed there.
Not for a race weekend. I have stayed at Riverside, though.
Okay. I stayed at French Quarter for a race that I was actually doing solo, and it was really nice to be able to know that I could just go down, hop on a boat, and go over to Disney Springs to get a meal, and whenever, not have to worry about, additional transportation on top of that, especially solo. It was nice to do that kind of quickly. Beautiful resort. French Quarter is on the smaller side, so I'm sure availability gets to be an issue there, but I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and because it's a smaller resort, people actually really like staying there for race weekends because it tends to have its own bus going to the events. So busing is usually not very backed up because it's only a couple buildings, really.
Yeah, and that's a perk, too, is with some of the larger resorts, when you're getting up early in the morning and you have to walk over to the buses that pick you up, it's a short walk no matter where you stay because the resort is smaller.
So my brother and his husband actually stayed at French Quarter 2 years ago, and they loved it, for all the same reasons that you guys talked about. And then they spent a lot of time in the parks, and since they, it's a little bit smaller than Port Orleans, it's just got the one stop. It was easy to get over to the parks back and forth rather than staying at that bigger resort like you guys are talking about.
So another moderate that we want to talk about that is one of our favorites, I think, for a race weekend is Coronado Springs. Now, kind of talking about smaller to larger resorts, they did just add the whole tower to this. So this is definitely a larger resort.
And it was a larger resort to begin with. It's very spread out and it holds a lot of people.
Yes, but we like this resort. All the rooms are recently renovated, plus all the rooms in the tower are brand new, of course. So I think we like most of the amenities. The quick service is kind of hit or miss, but they have a lot of really great restaurants there, especially with the new openings.
Yeah, and we are planning on going to stay in the tower for a race weekend coming up. It was where we were supposed to stay for Star Wars, and then that got canceled. So we'll have to do a makeup on that trip.
Yeah. One major con with this resort, though, is because it is bigger, it has a bus loop. And now the RunDisney buses do go around that back loop to pick people up. But if you are on one of the later loops or later bus stops, you may have to wait a couple buses because they will fill up in the first bus stop or two. So I think we sat there for maybe over 30 minutes one time, just watching buses go by us.
It was 30-40 minutes. We weren't getting too stressed out because we know the timing of RunDisney events. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people who were at the stop with us who were first timers or maybe just a little more anxious, and they were getting worried. We, were able to kind of talk them down a little bit, but it's something to keep in mind. I will say if that's a worry you have, just make sure you get up early and get to your bus stop, no matter where you stay, and give yourself a really good cushion. Another thing about Coronado to keep in mind because of the size, they do have some good food options there, I will say. A little pricey, but depending on where your room is, you may have a long walk to get to where the food options are. And after races, specifically, it hurts to walk that far. So the last moderate option that we're going to discuss today that we've stayed at, technically considered by Disney to be moderate, are the cabins at Fort Wilderness.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a different option, but we have definitely enjoyed it for RunDisney weekends. You get your own cabin, and you get the area outside of the cabin and the whole deck area. So we liked having that whole space. You get a whole full kitchen as well, which is very convenient for race weekends.
And you're a little bit removed from other guests. You don't have someone in a room right next to you potentially making noise. You have a little bit more space between each cabin, which is very nice. There's also a perk on if you have your car or a rental car, it can be parked right there at the cabin with you. So if you want to jump in your car to go to a park or to Disney Springs instead of waiting on a bus, you have that option. And also in the mornings, you can jump in your car and drive up to where the buses pick you up instead of having to walk somewhere. And if you want to drive to the races, which we don't always recommend anymore because it's gotten a little crazy, you can always take your car and drive there as well.
And kind of bouncing off of that, if you don't have a car, you do have to take the internal busing through Disney to the front of Fort Wilderness and then get on the RunDisney bus.
Or
so sometimes
you can rent
that could take
golf
a while.
cart.
That too.
Which is a little bit pricey, but it is very convenient, I will say. A con to staying here compared to some of the other, regular hotel resorts is while you have great food options available, they're a little harder to get to on foot. You may want to take a bus to get back to Trails End and Hoop-de-Doo, that type of thing.
Have you ever stayed at the campground or even been over there, Steve?
I spent a lot of time just wandering around Walt Disney World, and my favorite place is Wilderness Lodge, which I know you guys love too. So I've taken the boat actually over there, and it looks like an amazing place to stay, but I haven't stayed there yet.
We love it. I grew up staying there. That's where my family vacationed all the time.
Yeah, and kind of bouncing off of that, we have also stayed in tent camping and RV camping for race weekends. So those are good options if you're looking for something very cheap. However, you are very slim on your amenities at that point. Of course, you still get the internal busing, but you don't get a kitchen except for the small charcoal grill. And you are limited to using the bathhouses for kind of any of your morning routine, bathroom, shower, and whatnot.
Unless you have an RV. And then, of course, you have whatever amenities are available in that RV. We stayed with my parents in their RV, which was really nice because they took care of like setting it up. They know, all about how it works. And we even had a kitchen in that. I would suggest if you're considering using Fort Wilderness, either trying to stay there a few days or a trip before you do it for RunDisney the first time, so you know what to expect and you know that it's going to be comfortable enough for you and such, because running a RunDisney race is just, it has all these other things you have to think about outside a normal vacation, and that kind of takes some of the stress away.
I got a quick question for you guys. I know the rest of the resorts are pretty popular. You got to be right on it to get a reservation there. And I know Fort Wilderness is really popular. Is that something that you're going to have to do pretty far out to make sure that you get a reservation for race weekend, Katie?
I think so, especially lately. I feel like it's gotten harder and harder, even to find like the tent camping spots. Because we have considered it a few times since we've stayed there.
It can be kind of hit or miss. It depends on the time of year for certain. There's also a weird kind of hack that people use involving the campsites where they may stay at a nicer resort off property but book a campsite simply for the means of getting magic bands, fast passes, and dining early, basically booking a package. So sometimes you'll go there and you may have trouble getting a reservation, and you'll go and there'll be lots of empty spaces. And you'd be like, well, this is weird. I thought that this was completely booked up. And it's because some people do that. Now, I'm sure that's a very slim portion, but it does happen.
So another perk at staying at Fort Wilderness, besides obviously it's going to be a little bit cheaper and it's a beautiful place to stay, is the ease of transportation in two ways. First off, I feel like less runners stay there because it's not a traditional hotel. So usually in the mornings when you're catching the bus, it's very easy to get on the first bus that comes. It usually shares, depending on the weekend, it'll share buses with Wilderness Lodge and Contemporary. But I feel like it must usually be the first stop.
It is.
Because usually you get the empty bus. I think because they know that it's not going to fill up on the first time around. And then you also have the ease of transportation, like Steve said, of catching boats over to Magic Kingdom and all the resorts on the monorail loop in Bay Lake.
Yeah, good point. So now that we've kind of jumped down, we are going to continue with the value side of things. And I think all have stayed at Pop Century for a race weekend, which is somewhere where we stay probably the most for race weekends due to kind of its transportation options, prices, and its ease for the weekend.
Yeah, it's a great place to stay for RunDisney weekends, I think. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I loved it when we stayed there. And actually, I like the food options there, too. It's fairly reasonable. You can go over to Art of Animation as well if you want to use their food court, which we didn't do that. But a lot of people I know say that that's a great place to get food. But I think we had some pretty good pasta at a reasonable price the night before I ran the marathon 2 years ago. So I really like that aspect of it. And now with the Skyliner as well, it kind of gives you options to get over to Epcot if you want to. I keep talking about food, don't I?
I mean, we're talking about RunDisney. Food is a very big deal for everyone who's at RunDisney because we're hungry all the time.
It's synonymous.
Yeah, so you can stop over, even at the New Riviera if you want to, Epcot and Hollywood Studios. So I love that option as well of giving you things to do pretty easily.
Yeah, and I agree with the food. It's probably the best place to stay with the most options for different food, except for maybe Disney Springs adjacent.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Probably one of the biggest perks is that this is a Skyline resort now, and the Skyline just makes it very quick and easy to get anywhere. We've been able to get back from a RunDisney event, shower, eat, and then take the Skyline back to Epcot, and then watch like the finishers come back in for the race. That's how easy it was.
That was really nice. We did that for Princess this past year.
Yep.
That was really fun.
They don't run the Skyline ahead of time for the races at all, like the monorail, do they?
No, and that's important to note. A lot of people will ask that question when they're first kind of booking their rooms and considering, where's the best place to stay. And they do not run it in the morning. They put the signs out, pretty early that no Skyliner transportation is available for race morning events. But it does open up at its normal time that day. So you can, I know some people will, after they finish the race, walk through Epcot and catch it to go back instead of taking a bus, just like people will walk through Epcot if they're staying on the boardwalk.
And I found that as far as the buses go, I got up in the morning, and we usually don't get on the very first one. We wait till about 3:45 or so, maybe 4, and kind of push it a little bit. But they had 4 or 5 buses all lined up in a row, and you could get on. So if it's a cold morning, sometimes as Marathon Weekend goes, they had the buses running. You could get on and kind of wait until your bus filled up and went. So I thought it was really easy that way as well.
That's usually the resort where I feel like where we've stayed, where they stack up the most buses kind of early. And I think they know they get a lot of runners staying there. So I don't think we've ever had a transportation issue there.
No, kind of the same with what you said. I think almost every morning that we've been there, they've had 3 or 4 buses, even at that 3:30 time, kind of ready to pick you up and go.
They're ready to go from there. Now, they don't usually share a bus in the morning, but they usually share a bus on the way back. Is that right?
Yes, with Art of Animation.
Okay, so that's really not a problem then. Just know that you may have to stop at Art before you get back to Pop. Yep. You could always get off at Art if you wanted, because you could just walk through. So,
bouncing off of Pop Century, we have also stayed at Art of Animation for a few race weekends. We've stayed both in the studio or suite type rooms, and also in the Little Mermaid rooms, which are pretty much a standard value resort room with a Little Mermaid theme. Again, same amenities that you get with staying at Pop. I think the Little Mermaid rooms are very outdated. And the suites are very nice if you're staying like with a family, especially a family that has young kids. They are very like Disney themed. You have the different areas, and all those rooms are themed after their movies, which is very cool. But if you're looking for kind of nicer upscale, you can get a very similar value at a nicer resort.
Right. You're going to pay a moderate price for that suite with the additional room. So if you really don't need the additional room, I would say go ahead and upgrade yourself to like Coronado or something.
Hey guys, before we swing up to the deluxe resorts, kind of going back to Saratoga Springs, I kind of missed a couple points there, but it is a huge resort. So I guess the one downside, as you guys have been talking about, is that it is a little bit of a walk to get to food, whether you're going to Disney Springs or just the main food area, unless you happen to be staying right by there. But right near the clubhouse is where the bus picks you up. So they don't have buses that run throughout the entire resort like you were talking about. And I can't remember which resort it is.
Coronado.
I'm sorry. Coronado. So that there is only one stop. So depending upon where you are, it can be kind of, you might have to get up 15, 20 minutes early just to make that walk over to get in the buses. But they do stack them up there, and they run really efficiently as well. So those are just a couple of things I thought of about Saratoga Springs before you head on from there.
Right. And one thing I would say about Saratoga that we kind of did that helped us when we stayed there for a race weekend, we stayed in an area that was very close to the walk to Disney Springs, but was a little bit of a walk to where the bus picked you up for the race. And I would suggest maybe taking a walk the day before along the route to get to the front, because it's going to be nighttime and you might be a little disoriented and you don't want to get kind of lost on that walk. Might be a good idea.
Going along with the deluxe theme now, we're going to transition on over to one of our favorite resorts overall, and that's Wilderness Lodge.
We love Wilderness Lodge so much.
We do love Wilderness Lodge, and it is a pretty great place to stay for a RunDisney race weekend. A bigger resort, but not the biggest resort as for rooms overall. We specifically like the Copper Creek rooms. Mm-hmm. They are the newest section of DVC. And we just love all the amenities that you get there, as well as the food options. Geyser Point is great.
Yes. Great thing about Copper Creek is, I believe, and I can be corrected, that the Copper Creek designated rooms are going to be the closest DVC rooms available. Like, they're the closest, and then Boulder Ridge is a little further away. Mm-hmm. Still not very far. I don't think it really makes that much of a difference, but I did notice that when we were staying there recently.
Yep. Now, I know, Steve, you guys have a contract there. Have you at least gotten to stay there? Maybe not specifically for a race weekend?
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to stay there twice, actually, in the Copper Creek area. So, as you said, Katie, Boulder Ridge is actually a separate building from the main lodge, so it is a little bit of a walk, but it's not too far. And one of the things that I love now that they have is they put in that new pool over by Geyser Point. So if I feel like the RunDisney weekends, a lot of times, you're traveling with adults, you may not have your families with you, or traveling with friends and running, which is what my wife and I do. And so that pool is a little bit more of a quieter pool to kind of hang out at. They've got one hot tub for sure, I know, over there. So we really enjoy that. And then Geyser Point is just probably our favorite place on property as far as relaxing and eating.
Yeah, it's lovely to sit at Geyser Point, and we really love that pool as well. We actually didn't go to it last time we went, I think because we switched resorts in the middle, so we didn't have as much downtime. But we have been there, and we love those cabana structures that they have with the comfortable seating and everything. It's really, really, really nice.
Yeah, and it is one hot tub, but it's like huge. A 20-foot long hot tub. It's huge.
And you don't have to pay for those cabanas either, at least not in the winter. You can do it's just kind of first come, first serve, so they're really nice.
You ever have to pay for them?
No, it's not like a beach club.
Yeah. Okay.
So now to our final deluxe resort that we've stayed at, and that's Bay Lake Tower. We just stayed here during Marathon weekend. We had done a split stay with that and Wilderness Lodge, and I'd enjoyed it a lot. It is a good location, great walking distance to Magic Kingdom. I think the best thing regarding to a race weekend is if you're staying there for Marathon weekend or Princess weekend, where the race start is at Epcot, you can take the monorail to the TTC and then take that TTC monorail to Epcot, and you go right on over that parking traffic that seems to be building up during those race weekends.
Right. And I will say, when we were kind of planning that trip beforehand when we stayed there, our reason for staying there was not related to that transportation at all. It was more of we've never stayed here. It's a special weekend. We want to splurge. And I will say that transportation benefit is huge. I would put a value on that and consider it when running the marathon weekend, in the future.
Absolutely. And that specific reason does also spread to the Polynesian and the Grand Floridian as well, and the Contemporary, but that is connected to Bay Lake.
Right. And something additional that goes along with kind of that transportation perk is you actually go through the security bag check in a different location as well, with way less people than is at the normal entrance to the race.
Good point. Do you have anything to add?
No, you made me want to stay there next time we get an opportunity to get down there and run. That sounds like the perfect place, especially being able to use the monorail. Do you think if you stay at Wilderness Lodge, they probably don't have the buses going that early that you could pop over to get on the monorail at the Contemporary, could you? No,
I don't think.
Not unless you swam.
I guess you could close out, I don't know, Trader Sam's and just hang out for a little while at the Poly.
That sounds terrible.
Or you could turn it into a triathlon, like you said. Swim on over to the Contemporary run, and then get a bike when you get back to Wilderness Lodge and head on over to the campgrounds on it.
Do they have the bike trail open again?
Not yet. I don't think so, at least.
I love that bike trail. I really want them to open it back up. No, because it goes by reflections. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Do you have any other points or anything else to add overall?
No, I just think that I haven't had the opportunity to stay off property, but staying on property, RunDisney just does such a good job with their transportation, getting you to and from the races, over to the expo, and with all the different food amenities around the resort. that to me is just has been the easiest way to stay, and we love it.
Between the places you've stayed, or maybe even somewhere where you're planning to stay for a future Run Disney event, where do we think our favorite places to stay are for a race weekend? And I'll go ahead and go first, put myself on the spot there, as Steve loves to say. I'm going to go ahead and say Pop Century, because, again, that access to the different food, the 2 different quick service options you have there, and the Skyliner all just make it a very convenient place to stay. And we didn't mention it before, but you are the closest resort to the expo, so you get to and from the expo via the busing very, very quickly, which is nice.
Yeah. My turn?
Katie?
Okay. I think my favorite place to stay is actually probably camping at Fort Wilderness. It's definitely comes with a lot of variables you have to keep in mind. Weather, usually it's just weather. But I find it very relaxing, and I like the ability to kind of get away from the crowds and, relax without having to be confined to your room. Like, you can chill out in your hammock and be in nature and get your rest. And I think it's just a really, really nice place to stay.
I almost picked that as well. What about you, Steve?
Oh man, you're gonna put me on the spot here. I'm gonna still stick with Saratoga Springs as a DVC member. I think, kind of as you say, Katie, it's huge, but it's a quiet place overall. It's pretty relaxing when you come back after you've done that run. I know my wife and I just sat out on the patio for like an hour and just chilled out. There's 3 different pools you can go to if you want to get in a hot tub. They're never really crowded. The main one by the lodge can be busy, but the other 2 are generally pretty quiet. And then just the option of food. So if you're a DVC member, it's the lowest points. So a lot of times, because of the runs, you're not doing as much as you normally do. So for value, I think it's the best. But I have to agree with you too. Like either Art of Animation or Pop Century, that's just another perfect place to stay too.
Yeah, I think the value you get with that, it's a little more expensive than the All-Stars, but just that added Skyliner and the really nice quick services on both ends are very worth it.
Yeah. All good options. I would stay anywhere if it meant I got to do a Run Disney race.
That is true. All right. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this show. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. And Steve, thank you so much for coming on. And if you would, feel free to plug all of your places.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I love always talking with you guys. Love following you guys in your vlogs and everything you guys bring out. Yeah, so it's myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris over the DCL Podcast. We're mostly a Disney Cruise Line podcast, but we love talking Adventures by Disney and also Run Disney as well. So you can find us wherever podcasts are, wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook at DCL Podcast. On Twitter, I'm on on Twitter. I'm at DCL Podcast. You can follow me there. And then we're also on Instagram too, DCL Podcast, or Instagram.com/DCL_podcast.
Yep.
But if anybody wants to come over and check out our podcast, we'd love to have you come over and take a listen. It's we have a lot of fun, and we love following what you guys do as well.
Yeah, definitely check them out. Top tier Disney podcast for sure. One of our favorites, and we've been featured on a couple episodes as well, which is fun.
You got to be careful though, because it's going to end up costing you thousands of dollars when it makes you want to take Disney cruises.
This is true.
And I will have to give a plug out. We still have Princess Weekend, which is going to be coming out this week. So I'm not sure when this will get out, but look for the 2 of you talking about Princess Weekend, the last one that you guys ran. So that'll be up soon.
Well, that's all we got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that YouTube-y stuff that's all over the screen. And thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.